The first word that pops into my mind about my mom, genuine.
Loving.
Love.
Compassion.
Crazy.
Is charity.
Example.
Crazy.
Bold.
Humble.
Loving. Food.
Chop suey. Sorry.
Tennis. Church.
Gardening.
Mine's is sassy.
This is wisdom.
Is faithful.
Strong.
Faithful.
Independent.
She's caring. She's sweet and nice. Really, really thoughtful. Strong.
Sarcastic.
The number one word I think of when I think of Gram is strong.
I think my word is shut your mouth. Grandma used to say that a lot.
Mine's family.
The first word that I think of when I hear grandma is love, because I love grandma and she loves me.
And the first word that comes to my mind when I think of grandma is funny. She's funny.
Okay, so the funniest story I remember about Grandma is we were living in 50 Park Rose in Daly City. And Uncle Willie and Auntie Rosie came over to visit, and I had just met them. I didn't know them too well. But I didn't know that, I guess Uncle Willie and Grandma like to tease each other, because I was sitting there in shock as he was teasing Grandma going, "Free Willie, Free Willie." And so as I'm cracking up, Mom turns around and tells him, "Hey, go fix your teeth." So that's the funniest story I remember about Grandma.
That's a weird story, but you shared it. And actually, I don't have a specific funny story to share, but Gramz actually is pretty funny herself. She had a great sense of humor, loved to laugh, and she loved to do things like that, tease her brother-in-laws, Uncle Willie. I remember her joking a lot with him and with Uncle Clarence and Uncle Simmy, definitely. She had so many fun stories to share with us, and I couldn't do her stories justice, but she would share stories with us that would just have us all cracking up. And so I don't have a specific story because I can't do her stories justice, but I will always cherish the stories she shared with us.
We're at my bridal shower, and towards the end of my bridal shower, my mom was giving a emotional speech and thanking everyone. And she took like a dramatic pause because she was getting really emotional and getting ready to cry. And during her dramatic pause, Grandma yelled out, "Play the music!"
My funny story would be when Gramz was told that one of her grandsons wasn't a very good looking guy. So Gramz got pissed and said, "Well, look in the mirror."
One time we went to a funeral in California, just me and Grandma, and she went up to talk, and it was for her cousin's funeral, and she talked about her dad beating her the whole time. And I was sitting back there like, "Grandma, don't do that." But Grandma kept going and going, and it had like, her cousin was in the story for about like 2 minutes.
We were watching her favorite sport, tennis, and I asked her who her favorite player was, and she said it was Djokovic. And then I asked her why, and she said he was really handsome. And I just started laughing when she told me that, and she was like, "Yeah, that's why he's my favorite player, because he's really handsome."
Just the way she was in front of everyone or with everyone whenever we get together for family functions. She was always constantly, whoever she was talking to, I would notice like she's always joking around with them or cracking jokes on what they're up to or what they're doing and stuff.
So my favorite, or like kind of a fun one of Grandma, we would go to church on Sundays when we were living at the house behind Walmart on 56, and you know what I mean, we would go to church all the time. And this one Sunday we were going to church, and right after church, all the kids, we already had the car keys. You know, Jared's in the front DJing already. Just got out of Sacrament, or out of church on Sunday, and we're already listening to rap music. Grandma comes out of the chapel feeling the spirit, looking all holy, and then she gets into the car and kind of like, you know what I mean, we're all just quiet listening to our rap music on Sunday, and she gets in like, oh, nice, it's good to come out and then feel the spirit, and then start listening to cuss words, and, and then she shuts off the radio.
The funniest times I had with Graham was hearing her tell people to shut up. That was so funny to me.
The funniest memory I have of Gramz is when she would tell Saya to shut up.
She never told me. It was always Jared, Jordan, or John.
No, she's just always...
Or her kids.
Clowning on everyone and making jokes and just making every family function fun for everyone, and that's one of my best memories about her.
Something funny I remember about Gramz was when she told me to remember that I wear the pants in the relationship.
Something I always remember about Gramz was just a funny story. When she came back from, I think it was Kingsley's, what was it, homecoming or farewell, she had like Indian fried bread. And so since my husband is half Native American, she kept asking me to ask my mother-in-law to get the Indian recipe for that fried bread.
Alright, so my funny story is actually probably a week before Grandma passed away. So me, BJ, Auntie Jan, and Liz were in the room, and we were moving Gram, trying to rotate her, make her feel comfortable, and we tried to ask Grandma if she was doing okay, and if she felt good, and she wasn't really responding. So I was like, oh man, maybe we should say it in Samoan. And so I was trying to ask Auntie, I was like, Auntie, how do you say are you good in Samoan? And Auntie was like, oh, and she started saying it, whatever she was saying, and Grandma looked at her and she was like, Mom, are you blah, 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 saying it in Samoan? And Grandma looks up, she goes, what are you saying? And we're like, oh shoot. But the whole time, even before that, she always whispered all the time, but that was like the first time for a long time I ever heard her speak clearly. So that's my funny story.
My funny story is, so one time we were at someone's wedding, one of our cousin's wedding, and Gramz was talking about the other side of the family, and she was like, you see the way they were looking at us? They were giving us dirty looks. And then she goes, don't they know we can do that better?
I went to the gynecologist, and my mom went and told Gramz, she's like, yeah, we're gonna go take Jen to the gynecologist real quick. We'll be back later. And Gramz looked at me and she said, you need to wash your boy parts really good, Jen. And I said, what? And she said, you heard me, wash your boy parts really good.
My funny story is how Grandma used to always try and watch the same tennis matches, but explain them to us like she knew what was going to happen.
Mine is when I first met her. I don't think she knew Nico had a girlfriend then, so when Nico introduced me, she had like this confused look on her face. So when I went in to hug her and stuff, she still had that look on her face. And so I kind of took it as a bad impression of me, like she didn't like me. But I guess when I went in to give her a hug, she looked at Nico and smiled at him and gave him a thumbs up. So
I always loved how Grandma would never make fun of me because of my weight, and how she would never make fun of my haircuts because they're always really cool, and how she would never call me the devil child to my face.
Came home from Sadie's dance at almost 2 in the morning. Grandma was the first one to greet me because she was up watching tennis. That's about it.
I remember telling Grandma that I love to watch tennis, even though I didn't, just so she would like me better than my brothers and sisters.
I think a funny memory is just how many times Grandma would tell me to cut my hair in a day, at least 5 times. One of my favorite memories of Gramz was when we would take pictures and the whole time everyone's counting down and she sits there and just goes, "Hi, John," or whoever's taking the picture.
My story is like, whenever we got in trouble, Grandma just bite us. Not hit us or anything. I don't know.
So one time Grandma had a coconut and she was opening it and then she hit it really hard and then like it splattered everywhere so we couldn't even eat it. Yeah.
Her retirement party, when we all came together and were able to travel to California and to pay tribute to Gramz and all her hard work that she did for FedEx. But being there at the gymnasium and in the church, just seeing a whole lot of people there, feeling all their love that they had for Grandma, and seeing her get up and dance and seeing how beautiful and graceful she was a really good time for us, for me, and being there with all our family.
I don't have a funny story, but my favorite memory of Grandma is when during her retirement party and I had to perform the Taulunga. I just remember being really nervous, and when I came out on stage, the whole gym was dark and the only thing I could see was Grandma dancing with me. And I remember almost crying as I was doing my dance, but I had to fight it and just dance along with Grandma.
The number one thing that I learned from my mom is, to talk. She was a conversationalist. She loved to talk. And the thing about it is, she wanted us to be strong, stand up for yourself. I learned that pretty well.
First thing I learned from Ms. Davidson / moms is that talk with her, she loved family. She loved all of her kids, and we used to always talk about her kids to me, and she liked everything different about them. And they was her world. I mean, she would stand up for them no matter what. And she was always forgiving.
I would say that endurance is the thing that I think I learned from her example. She has endured through so much in her life and has continued to strive to do her best. Her faith in God and her will to do the right thing as best she knew how is been the greatest example in my life from anyone, not just my mom, but from anyone I know. She's the greatest example in that way to me.
So the number one thing that I learned from Grandma was that she wanted me, when we first met, I was not a member of the church, and so not being a member of the church, I don't think at that point in time that I was a good father to my kids, a good husband to my wife, and a good son or son-in-law to her and to my mom. But in joining the church, I was able to learn the lessons that are there for me to better myself and to be the best that I could be. So that's the main thing that I learned from her. And love for my family. Family is very important. And that's what I learned.
To have a big heart. To love everybody. To stay close to God.
One thing I learned from Grandma is hard work.
For me, the one thing I learned from Grandma is how important tithing is. As we've been married and paying tithing, is really we've seen the blessings in our lives with paying bills and staying self-efficient and doing everything on our own. So, all thanks to Gramz.
It's Gramz' honesty. She's always taught us to, be very honest with others and with our dealings with others, and be true to ourselves. And that's the number one thing I had to say that I learned from Grandma.
Being caring and supportive of how, because I always seen her be very nice to V and Jody and anybody who ever needed to hear her spread her wisdom to them and let them know that she did care about them and that she loved them very much. And it also helped me and Jamie when we lived with her to know that even though she was criticizing me on something I did, it was just because she loved us, and it helped us out a lot.
The number one thing I learned from Grandma is to have an unwavering faith. Throughout Grandma's life, she went through many trials, and she never lost her faith in the Lord or in the gospel. And I hope to one day have a faith like Grandma's.
To always try to do good by others, and to treat them as you would want to be treated. I think just hearing stories about Gramz from the past and seeing it for ourselves when we were kids as well. A lot of people looked up to her because of the way she treated people, and I think that's something that I hope I can put into practice in my life as well.
There's not only one thing I learned from Gramz, there's a lot of things that I learned from her. She taught us how to be clean, and she taught us to be trustworthy. Also her love for God and putting Him first, and her dedication and hard work, and anything that you do, you put your mind to it, you can accomplish it.
She's very honest, and yeah, she's like really blunt, but at the same time she never came off as like offensive. Like I remember she was really worried about me and Jordan when he got back from his mission and we were still dating and stuff. She was worried about us like getting married in the temple and making it there and stuff, and it must have been like probably the third time I went over to to Gram's house that she actually had that talk with me. But it was really like, I didn't feel uncomfortable or anything, just because I could feel that she really was genuine about it and not coming off as like judgmental or anything. It was just out of love. So that's what I loved about her and learned from her.
You love your family. I know she really loves her family, loved every one of us, and did anything in her power that she could to take care of her family. That was her biggest priority. So I think with me, learning something from that, I'm gonna try to do the same. Put my family first, put God first. That's another thing that she did, or that I learned from her. She always had her priorities straight, but most of all, loving her family.
Always put the Lord first in everything you do, and it's just always been about the gospel. Even though my life is not living it right now, I still learned it from her.
Basically, just to have fun with everything and everyone around me, and how to love one another, and especially my children, the way that I see how she loves her family and how she loves her grandchildren, is how I would want to be when it's my turn to be a grandma.
The most important thing that I learned from Gramz is you're never too old to love and care for people.
The most important thing I learned from Grandma is to always put the gospel first in our lives, and to make education and the temple a priority.
I've learned to appreciate the things and the people you have in your life.
Work hard.
The number one thing I learned from Grandma is, do you, boo-boo. Her exact words.
Having a testimony about the gospel. Just every time that she'd get up in church, whenever I'd be there with her, her message always got through to me, and I always love to hear her testimonies.
One thing that I learned from Grandma is I learned how to fall asleep sitting up because the prayers would be too long.
Gramz taught me to be hardworking and kind, and to be God-fearing and faithful, and that's more than one thing. So. Just by watching her, it wasn't always through conversation, it was through her example and hearing her testimony to always keep God at the center of my life.
What I learned from Grandma is always be nice to each other, because if we're not, then we're going to get smacked.
Or bitten.
Yeah.
Just always stay in the church.
So one of the things Graham taught me is to love everyone, love one another. I always remember hearing Graham always welcoming everyone into their house, and I feel like it's always been like that since I've known her, just to treat everyone like family.
The number one thing I've learned from Gramz is to love people for their hearts, not for their actions. And she's always loved everyone equally and always cared for them, even though a lot of us made bad choices. She still loved us the same.
The number one thing I learned from Gramz is how to clean. She was a very clean woman. If you lived with her, then she liked her house to be spotless. Any little thing that was on the floor made the whole house look dirty. So yeah, that's what I've learned from Gramz, is just how to keep everything clean.
You have to stick your tongue out. Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way.
I love Gramz. Yeah. We love Grandma!
Woo!
Look at my bottle. No! Forget it.